Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session on a Friday afternoon. Hope everybody's day is going good. This is Phil, and today I really don't know what I'm going to talk about. We'll just kind of figure it out on the fly. We got a new room here. Not really a new room, it's the same old room, it's just in a different place. It's kind of like wherever we go, there we are. I think John Kabat-Zinn wrote a book like that. He said, wherever you go, there you are. The same room, same people, just different spot. One thing I've sort of noticed after hanging with the room and the people for a while is people come into the room for different reasons. So some come in to, in a sense, have their homework done so that we can give them a lesson, so that we can tell them how to do the work of living their life. Or that they seek some advice. So some come in to have us do their thinking for them. And then others come in with the intent of giving us a lesson. To tell us their religious doctrine or their belief or what they think. And some come in to do our thinking for us. So some come in so that we may do their thinking for them, and others come to do their thinking for us. But not everybody's like that. But a lot of people are. And there's nothing really right or wrong about it. It's just where they're at. But I like to challenge people to inquire for themselves rather than giving them an answer. And even if they're trying to give me an answer, I still like to challenge them to inquire for themselves. Not just to take what I say or anybody in the room says here at face value, but to really look at it and at a deep level and see if it resonates with your own heart. Because one thing I really believe is that we can be of one mind and yet still have minds of our own. And I believe that we can be one body of just awe and wonder. One body of awe and wonder. And I believe that collectively, that we can become aware of what's relatively essential and also of what's absolutely essential. Both of what is essential to be a condition of, and also aware of that which is essentially without conditions, which is unconditional. So it is good. It's good to cultivate an awareness of the essential. And in a sense, An awareness of the essential is itself essential. Otherwise, we find ourselves lost in a world of non-essential pursuits, non-essential beliefs, non-essential desires. So there's a blindness, but there's also this blindness to what is essential, to what really matters. And that's the darkness that we want to find our way out of. St. Paul in the scriptures of the Bible, he said, he spoke of love, and he said we can understand all the mysteries. We can understand all mysteries, but if we have love, do not have love, it profits us nothing. It profits us nothing. It doesn't add anything to our being. It doesn't give us true light. And he said in the same epistle to the people he spoke to, he said that knowledge passes away, but love remains. And so when we consider what's essential, it would be that which is eternal, which remains. What we know by loving, what we know by loving, that is what is essential. What we know by faith, that is what is essential. What we know by hope, that is what is essential. For these are eternal ways. And there's no way to them, for they themselves are the way. There's no way to love. Love is the way. There's no way to faithfulness. It is the way. There's no way to hope. It's the way. These eternal things are ways in and of themselves. They're a way of knowing by being. They're a way of knowing by being. We know what it is. We know what love is from loving. And when we're loving, we are being loving, you know? So there's insight, but true insight is to see the world with eyes of love, with loving eyes. Eyes that love what is. For there exists nothing else besides what's here now to love. How will we love what's not here? I mean, we have to be present with it, you know. So it's a matter of loving what's here. And Jesus spoke to us. He said, if your eye is single, your whole body would be filled with light. I remember him saying that. If your eye is single, your whole body will be filled with light. With light. So there's this seeing, this awareness that comes from a posture of singularity, of oneness, of being one with what we behold. There's this awareness that comes from this posture of being one with what we behold. Very simple, yet very, very simple in its nature. Yet, since the beginning, people have sought to go beyond that. Jesus told us, he said, the disciple is not above his master. It's enough for the disciple to be as his teacher. To be as his teacher. To be as his teacher. It's enough for the disciple just to be as his teacher. It doesn't have to go beyond the teacher. Doesn't have to go beyond what is taught. Doesn't have to go beyond what is asked. And there are times when going beyond is just as bad as going behind. The trick is just to be in that space of what's asked of us, you know. Because love recognizes love. Love recognizes love. And what love does, what love does not know, is that which is not loving. What love does not know is that which is not loving. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? Throughout the scriptures in the Bible, and I may speak from the Bible, but that doesn't mean I'm stuck with that. I use a lot of different sources. I love the Tao. I love all kinds of scripture, but when I say that love bears witness to love, and when I say things like love does not know what is not loving, when I consider Jesus, and I consider how the people that were loving in a parable of like the sheep and the goats, and he goes, to the sheep, I was naked and you clothed me and all this. And he goes, when were you naked? So they didn't know, they really didn't know who he was, but he knew who they were. They didn't even see themselves that way, but he knew who they were. He goes, come, enter into my kingdom. And then to the ones that were not loving, he goes, depart from me, I don't know you. It wasn't a harsh thing. It wasn't a judgmental thing. But it was I just don't recognize you. I don't know you. I don't recognize you. You know? So it's not what we know. It's what love knows. It's if love knows us or not. That's what's essential. What is essential isn't what we know in our minds. It's whether love knows us or not. If we're known to be loving or not. That's what's essential. But we can be of one mind, one heart, and one body of love. And the body of love knows its members. It feels together as one. When the hand hurts, the foot feels it. When the foot hurts, the head knows it. It's all part of being one. And so awareness, enlightenment, true seeing, awakening, whatever name you want to put on it, can only come about by being one with the body. One with that body of love. Because if you pluck the eye out of the body, it can't see. The eye only sees from being connected, from being part of the body. The eye can only see from being part of the body. Truth is only recognized by being part of that body of truth. If we're disconnected from the body, we're not seeing right. If we're disconnected from a body of love, we're not seeing right. We're not understanding. We're walking around like blind men, and we act unskillfully, unbecomingly, without grace when we're disconnected from that body of love. Because it isn't about knowing right or wrong. Knowing what's right and what's wrong has never made one righteous. It isn't about knowing what's right and wrong. Knowing what's right and wrong has never made one righteous. Because righteousness is not gained by knowing. Righteousness is a state of being. One with a body of righteousness. Righteousness comes from being connected to the body. To the body of righteousness, to the body of truth, to the body of love. And you have to be part of that body to understand it. Yet since the very beginning, men have sought to make things righteous on their own. And they've imposed laws of being upon one another rather than simply being one another, rather than simply resting in one body. They've imposed laws of being upon one another instead of simply being one another and letting one another simply be. Simply be. Because if we're going to really realize oneness, if we're really going to see the oneness that we want to see, we have to honor each other's uniqueness. For there to be unity, we have to allow diversity. For there to be unity, we have to allow diversity. Because oneness is not about forcing conformity. Oneness is not about forcing conformity. It's not about making everything to be the same at the same time. Oneness is not about compelling everyone to hold the same beliefs and same desires at the same time. That's folly. That's just folly. To try to compel and force everyone to hold the same beliefs and desires at the same time. It's insanity. To try to make those kind of things concrete is just craziness. Because things like beliefs and desires are impermanent. They change. They're supposed to change. They will change. And the one thing that doesn't change is that everything changes. There's nothing you can do to stop it. In time, everything changes, especially beliefs and desires. God, I hope mine do. I hope mine do. I hope I don't see things the same way as I'm seeing them now for eternity. What a drag that would be, you know? But somehow a lot of people still believe that. They still believe that salvation comes from indoctrinating a lost world with their personal beliefs, or their collective beliefs, or their personal desires, or their collective desires, which all change. People mistake indoctrination for bringing salvation to a lost world. And the world isn't saved by indoctrination of beliefs and desires. What people need to realize is that the world is not lost. They are. The world isn't lost. It's perfectly at home with itself. They are lost, not the world. But how people go out and try to save the lost. When it's they themselves that need to come to their senses. Because they've lost their sense of being one body of being. And having lost that sense, they go to war with one another with the best of intentions. They go to war to try to save the world. They kill one another in order to save the world. And why do they do this? It's because they believe they know what is right and wrong. They know what is right and wrong. And because they know what's right and what's wrong, they try to impose that. They try to force that. This has been happening since the beginning. Reading from the book of Genesis, it says, it's written. It says, now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. And the serpent said to the woman, did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you'll die. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and desirable for gaining wisdom. And she took some and ate it, and gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked, and sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Most of us have heard that story. Most of us have heard that story. But what I like about that story is it reveals that the first temptation was a temptation to become enlightened. To become enlightened. To eat of that tree of knowledge of good and evil. To have one's eyes opened up and be like God. To become enlightened. That was one of the first temptations. And that first temptation kind of arose from this core belief that we don't know enough. That we don't know enough. It came from this belief of lack. It came from this belief that we don't know enough, or this belief of lack. They had to know more. They had to see beyond. They didn't believe that life had provided for them all that they needed to know in that moment. They didn't know through the eyes of faith. It was sort of like a temptation to see the future, to go beyond the moment, to have to know what's beyond the moment. A temptation to make the future certain. A desire, a temptation to make a certain future based on a belief that we don't know enough, that what we know in this moment isn't enough. Yes, Adam fell asleep. It was falling into a dream. Yeah, and that's what we're waking up from today. Yeah. But that belief in lack and that desire to know the future, to know for certain, has come to manifest itself since then in diverse ways. One of the ways we can see it is in the desert, when what Dove was talking earlier about the people going into Egypt, and when they were called out of Egypt, they took this little trip in the desert, and ended up running around in circles in the desert, chasing their own tails, and but and according to the story, God rained manna, this angel food, this form of bread, down every day, so they'd have something to eat. Their daily bread, just like Jesus prays. He says, "Give us this day our daily bread." And so the manna would rain down from heaven every day, but they were warned not to store it up, just to take what they needed for the day and not to store it up. And yet they failed to believe that the manna would fall the next day. They wanted to make their future certain, and so they stored it up. And when they stored it up, it spoiled. And when it spoiled, it created diseases, and all kinds of people got sick and died. This greed that came out of fear that life wouldn't provide, that life would not provide moment by moment, breath by breath, as if there was something missing to be missed. From that sort of belief, of ambition, desire arose. And people began to seek security by conformity. They wanted a certain world that they knew. They wanted a world that they knew would be there. They wanted to know that they'd have manna the next day by making their own supply of it. And so they sought security by conformity, and they resisted change. They resisted the impermanence. They resisted the way that life flows and works. And they became frustrated in trying to change what can't be changed. The fact that everything changes. And that's one quick way to become frustrated, is to fall into obsessive thinking that you can force conformity and that you can change what cannot be changed. And that's that everything changes. You'll wear yourself out trying to keep the world from changing. But rather than having a resolved heart, they fell into having an ambitious one. Rather than simply having a resolved heart that came from a simple trust, a simple faith, very uncomplicated, just a surrender. They became ambitious. Ambition came out of that belief that God wouldn't provide, that life wouldn't provide, and they became enemies in their own minds with the universe. They became enemies in their own minds with the universe, and they began to see themselves as separate entities. And they began to see this need to create a world of their own. And so they did. And they miscreated. They created a world according to their own beliefs and desires, rather than just desiring life as it is. And that gave birth to discontentment. And they actually became enslaved by their own desires and driven by their own beliefs and desires, sort of like blind cattle. Like blind cattle. And in that darkness, in that blindness, they began to take up arms and kill each other out of fear. And all the while, that there was still this like shade of silence, this pasture of peace, these still waters that were right at their feet. Heaven was always there. And all they really needed to do was stop suppressing the truth of it being there. Because it never went anywhere. Heaven is eternal. The kingdom of God is eternal. It's eternal. It never went anywhere. It's always been here. It's here now. It'll always be here. But men began to sort of lay down pavement, build highways, create their own pathways, their own ways. And they still do today. They still do the same thing today. The funny thing is, you can try to pave your way over life. You can lay pavement over the top of grass. Yet, despite your best efforts, in time, the grass always seems to break through the pavement and come back into the sunlight. It forms cracks into that hard pavement, and just like the grass does that, life seems to form cracks in our hard, calloused ways. Our hard ways of being, our laws of being that we've paved ourselves over with. But the life didn't go anywhere, and it still seems to make its way back out. And it flowers and blooms, despite our best efforts to suppress the truth. The kingdom of God within us seems to still make its way out into the world, just the way that the grass makes its way up through the pavement. And we keep on trying to lay pavement down, but eventually we run out of material to pave our own way with. Eventually we run out of material to pave our own way with. And then the pathways of our own making seem to crumble apart in time. What we've paved over will return to being a lush field of green grass. A pasture of peace. The desert will come back to life. And when the light makes its way out, we remember. We remember the light that we are. And the light that we are, it seems to come out of us. It makes its way out of us. It's not something external to us. External light can tend to blind us. Look directly into the sun and there's a good chance if you look at the sun long enough, you'll go blind from it. You won't be able to, it'll become a permanent thing. But just looking in the sun for a minute or so, and then trying to see what's around you, you'll notice immediately there's a sense of blindness. Things don't become clear from looking directly into that light. Because when we look directly into light, we see the light, but we don't see what's around it. The light itself blinds us to the things around it. Sort of like at nighttime, if we look at the headlights coming at us down a dark road, especially if they have their high beams on, the light of those bright headlights will blind us. To what's behind them, that'll become hard to see. What's directly in front of them will disappear from our vision. If they're bright enough, all we will really see is the headlights in the dark. We won't see the stuff around the car. We won't even see the car. We'll just see the headlights themselves. And just the way that you look at those headlights in the dark, if you're looking for the light as something that's external to who you are, the light will do exactly the contrary to what you want it to do. It'll be just like looking at those headlights in the dark. Because a lot of people seen the light, but they've not yet entered into being that light in their awareness. They've into being who they really are, into just being themselves. I like it when Jesus was talking about being born again, and he looked at this guy named Nicodemus, and he goes, you got to be born again to see the kingdom, you know? And Nicodemus was like, how do I get back into my mom's womb? And he goes, no, you're missing the point. Missing the point. It isn't about being born as something new. It's about a birth back into being yourself. It's about a birth back into the innocence. It's not so much about a reincarnation as it is about a incarnation. Going back into being that innocent child that's still there at the center of your being. who you are at the center of your heart. To go back into being who you were before you became carnal in your thinking and believing and desiring, before you became indoctrinated by the world system. To go back into being who you were before you knew anything. And it's not a rebirth into ignorance, but it's a rebirth into innocence. It's a rebirth not into ignorance, but into innocence, so that you become wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. To be that prodigal son that remembers his way back home, yet not forget the lessons he learned in the journey. The prodigal son never did stop being a son. He was a son the whole time throughout that parable. And when I think of this, I think of King Solomon. One of the things he wrote what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again, and there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah, King Solomon, he said, what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again, and there is nothing new under the sun. And Solomon was like this dude. He was like this guy of really deep presence. He had hindsight, and he had foresight, but more than that, he had a very deep insight. He's seen what is that always was. He's seen what is that always was. He wasn't the kind of guy that would try to catch the evening news so much or read the morning paper as somebody that kept his gaze on the eternal. Not into the things that were new, but into the things, and not into news that was old, but a gaze at a steady, resolved gaze at what is eternal. He had the steady gaze at what is eternal. He's seen all the things changing around him. He didn't deny any of that. He didn't go into saying that this isn't. He didn't say that this world isn't happening, that these things are not happening around me. He didn't say that. Yet he rested in the changeless. He's seen all things change, yet he rested in what does not change. He knew the difference between what is relatively true and absolutely true. Because, beloved, in the knowing of truth, In the knowing of truth, we know nothing new. And in our knowing of truth, we know nothing old. In our knowing of truth, we simply know what is. We simply see what is. That is what is true. Looking into what is insight. And knowing what is, awareness of what is, that's true insight. That's true insight. And it's that insight that allows us to live and act and speak skillfully in this present moment. It's not our knowledge of what's old or new that makes us wise. Rather, it's our awareness of what is, what's here now. Because what is here now is all there is. So knowing something, knowing about something, that's not really true enlightenment. True enlightenment goes beyond just seeing the light. True enlightenment entails being the light. Because light that you see has already left its source. It's already left its source. You can look up in the stars in the night sky, and what you're seeing is the light from stars that have burnt out eons ago, light years ago. What you see is not what they are, but what they were. Because it takes light years to reach your eyes from where they are. There's that distance. And that's called light years. So enlightenment is not just seeing the light. Because we're seeing the light, but yet they're not there. We're not seeing them as they are, we're seeing them as they were. Do you see? So seeing the light it can never let us know the truth. Seeing the light is not knowing truth. Seeing light is about seeing what's behind us or in front of us, but it's not insight. It's not sight that comes from being an embodied presence. It's not sight that comes from being an embodied presence. And what do I mean by that? It's like if you get in a car and you drive it, from sitting in the driver's seat, right? Sitting in the driver's seat. And you're driving down the road and your headlights are on, but you're not blinded by them when you're sitting inside the car. And if you get outside of that car and look at the light, yeah, then it blinds you. But if you're in the car and the light is coming out from you, then the way is clear. It's easy to see. And that's what real true enlightenment is about. It's about the light that comes out of you, not the light that you're looking at. If you are the sun, you won't be blinded by the sun. You won't be blinded by the light that you are. You won't be blinded by the light that you are. But but the light that you see that is not who you are will blind you. Will blind you. Because when the light comes from the inside of you, then there's clarity. You look out the windshield at nighttime with your highlights on, you see very clearly. When the light is coming from you rather than at you. It's the light that comes from you, not the light that comes at you, that allows you to see. It's the light that comes out of being an embodied presence that allows you to witness what's really here. So in order to be this embodied presence, this entails inhabiting our body. This entails becoming sensitive and open. It entails allowing you to be at home in your body. A lot of times in spirituality, the body gets a really bad rap, but it really doesn't need to. Because what it is, in actuality, it's a gift that life has given us. For a time. And because it's for a time, we should spend our time wisely in the body. And be sensitive. Because if you've ever noticed, if your head is off in the future, or it's in the past, you kind of lose consciousness of your body. Your body becomes kind of lost in the rush. Because your head might be in the future, and your head might be in the past. But what's still here right now, what's still right here right now, is your body. My body is here right now. My mind can be 1,000,000 miles away from here, but my body's here, you know. In this here and in this now, as long as it's here, as long as the body's here, in this here and now, the body is an anchor to the present moment. The body is an anchor to the present moment. And it's given given us to stay in touch with the present moment. It's a gift that's given us to stay in touch with the present moment, to stay in touch with the world as it is in this moment. And if we forsake the body looking for something better, if we ignore the body, what happens when we ignore our bodies? We grow sick, we grow ill, we begin to suffer disease. When we do not give our body any attention, we end up being a disembodied presence. When our head is so filled with spiritual maxims, when our mind is so filled with doctrines and philosophies, when our body is ignored, what we are ignoring is the very temple of God. Different religions all say that the body is the temple. That's one thing that's one string that seems to weave its way through all kinds of faiths, is that the body is the temple, and that your body is the temple of God, and that God, and to dwell with God, you have to occupy your body. And to do that, you have to have a heart, a willingness, a capacity to be here. You have to have a heart, a willingness to see, to hear, to taste, to smell, to feel, to sense what's here right now. And when we're really, really seeing, really, really hearing and tasting and smelling and feeling and sensing what's here right now, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty intense. Because there's nothing wrong with what's here. Nothing wrong at all. And to know what's here is what our body's for. See, the body isn't bad. It's to connect us with that all. It's to connect us with that fullness, that fullness of the life that's here. It's given us so that we can experience the life that's happening right now all around us. It's so that we can give our heart to presence, give our heart to living. And then life begins to take place. Life just happens. When we don't force it or when we just let it happen. When we just let it happen. When we have the willingness not to will it to be any particular way, that lets the light come out. When we have a willingness to not have things be in a particular way, but just as they are. To feel what's here, to see what's here, to taste what's here, despite the conditions, an unconditional willingness. An unconditional willingness to be with what's here so that we want what we see rather than see what we want. Because if we're seeing what we want, we're seeing through the eyes of desire. But love will give us a resolve to just see things as they are. And when we want what we see rather than looking for what we want, we become lovers of truth. Then we become lovers of truth. And then we begin to experience what I call a desireless desire. A resolve of heart just to be present. And the fires of ambition just seem to flicker down. Because the heart that is resolved to hear hears. Yet the ambitious heart, the heart that's ambitious to speak, really doesn't hear anything. And the heart that is resolved to see, sees. Yet those that are ambitious to see anything become blinded to what is actually here. So we come back to our senses when we stop trying to see, hear, feel, smell, taste anything in particular. When we stop trying to see, hear, feel, smell, taste something that's not here. Then we can simply sense what's here. And when we simply feel what's here, that's called sensitivity. Sensitivity. But if we seek a feeling, if we try to feel something in particular, that's called sensuality. Sensitivity is unconditional by its nature. Yet, sensuality likes to sort feelings into categories. So, sensuality comes out of the ego. It likes to sort things in categories of being right and wrong and good and bad, and it likes to feel a certain way. It likes to present itself a certain way. So when somebody's putting on a fake smile and trying to pretend they're happy when they're sad, that's as much of a manifestation of sensuality as one who seeks out drug or alcohol or pornographic experience. They're just opposite ends of the spectrum, but they're the same thing. whether we're being put on or trying to put something on us, that both end up in that realm of sensuality. Attachment, aversion, indifference of feelings. That's all sensuality. And sensuality likes to wear the cloak of spirituality. It likes us to put that face smile on and go, I'm not my body. And I'm always happy. And I flutter around like a spirit. And nothing ever bothers me. Yeah. That's really the ego wearing a cloak of spirituality. It's really sensuality. It's not sensitivity. True spirituality is about sensitivity, and not not sensuality. Sensuality, like I said, is seeking a feeling, seeking to feel this way, seeking to feel that way. And when that happens, we begin to tell ourselves it's right to feel this way, it's wrong to feel that way. We beat ourselves up. We tell ourselves it's wrong for me to feel this way, it's right for me to feel this way. We look at others, we beat them up. We go, it's wrong for you to feel that way. You should feel like this. It's wrong for you to see that way. You should see things like this. It's wrong for me to sense things this way. I should sense them as that. All the ego wearing a cloak of spirituality. All the ego caught in sensuality. And when we try to force conformity to those ideas of what we should be feeling upon ourselves and others, what we become is without feeling. We become numb. We become hard. We become cold. And all of a sudden life gets to be a real serious matter. And we begin to walk on eggshells and worry about what other people will think of our spiritual walk, or or we'll beat ourselves up over it, you know? Huh. But it's all sensuality. Seeking to feel good, seeking to feel good, seeking freedom from desire. By feeding it what it wants. That's sensuality. We take a shot of dope in our arm. When I take the shot of dope, that desire, that craving, that ambition will leave me. Yeah, it will for a very short moment. Then it'll come back, bringing seven others with it. It'll bring back 7 times more powerful. It'll come back with more desire. And that becomes an obsessive chase. In the seeking of the pleasure, life becomes really painful. Because what we're doing is pursuing an illusion. You can't get rid of desire by feeding it. You can't get rid of desire by feeding it. And the funny thing is, we do the same thing with spiritual things, don't we? A lot of times we sense a desire for them, and we try to quench that desire with some kind of a teaching, with some kind of a program of enlightenment. And we kind of get a little bit of a rush from it when we see the light. But then we find ourselves blind again because the light that we see just doesn't do it. It just doesn't do it. You have to be it. You have to drive from inside the vehicle, you know? So the only water that can really quench that thirst, that can really quench that thirst of desire, is the water of the truth that's here, of the love that's here. And everything else ends up being just sort of a mirage out in a mirage of an oasis out in the desert. It's always just in front of us. And the more we chase after it and pursue it, the thirstier we get in trying to reach it. It doesn't quench the thirst. Where what we really need to be doing is just sitting still and letting the rain come to us. To stop chasing the sun and just sit through the night and let the sun come to us. To just sit still and quit running. Otherwise, we end up being like people who are late for an appointment, running around the room. They've got their car keys in their hand, looking for their car keys. Or like a drunk who uses his flashlight on his phone to go out and look for his phone that he thinks that he dropped in the dark. Or like some guy searching boxes in his house to find a map so he can find his way back home. But when we truly come to see, what we see is that we have the keys. The connection's there. The way is here. And that we're already home. We're already home if we can just be at home. If we can just be at home with what's here. And as long as we can be at home with what's here, we're never homeless. We're never homeless. We're never destitute. We're never lacking. we're always covered. We're always covered because life has us covered if we can just be at home with what's here. Because there is nothing else. There's nothing else. And I think at that time I'm going to make it a wrap. I'm going to make this a wrap. And I'll give the mic back to you, Lynn, while you're here. Thank you.